Welcome to the Commercial Real Estate Podcast powered by First National. I'm Aaron Cameron. With me, of course, Adam Pawadic. We're recording here live at the Land and Development Conference. Our guest today is a gentleman named Matt Young, President and CEO, Republic Developments. Thanks for joining us, Matt.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So, Matt, you're a younger guy. I think you're probably our age, but you've started your own company and you're running working on development. How'd you get here? Maybe just tell us the story of how you got into commercial real estate and how'd you end up, doing what you're doing today.
I'll give you the long story in a short format. I graduated university in 2007, just as the financial crisis was starting. I, at that point, knew I wanted to get into real estate development. Interviewed with a lot of people.
How'd you know?
I was really, growing up, I was very creative and I was very analytical, so I had kind of two sides of my brain. I wanted to do something that could stimulate both. I always loved architecture, and I thought it would be really cool to do something tangible and help create buildings around a city.
What's your degree?
I actually have a degree in sociology.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Exactly what you need.
Which exactly makes no sense. But in a funny way, it's actually helped.
Yeah, of course.
Because there's a lot of...
Study of humanity for what they need.
Psychology, and it's kind of helped, in leadership and as I've grown in my career. So I graduated, couldn't get a job. Come 2008.
Well, 2009, yeah.
2007 was just starting to get bad. 2008 was terrible. I remember posting a job post online on like Kijiji or Craigslist or something, and it was like for an analyst role, and I got 400 people. I was pretending to be an employer. I just wanted to see who my competition was, and I got 400 people apply for the job. VP,
all more qualified than you.
way more qualified than me. VPs from like Goldman Sachs in New York, ready to move up to Toronto, who were just fired. Like everybody you could imagine wanted this job, paying $50,000 a year. So I said, okay, I'm not going to compete with any of these people in this market. I need to go and get an education. So the only program at the time that I could find that was easily accessible and I could get into quickly was a program Haskayne Business School was doing at the University of Calgary. It was a certificate program in real estate development. And I said, okay, if I can't get a job in real estate, I should at least kind of learn how to do some of the basics and just cut my teeth a little bit. So flew to Calgary. About 3 weeks later, I got into the program, flew to Calgary, did a year of that. I guess I graduated mid-April of 2009, which is basically the bottom of the market. I was continuing to meet with people, talk to people, have phone calls with developers. I was networking a lot. And I had met with the guys at Lifetime Developments, Mel Pearl there. And he and I were just chatting here and there. And when I flew back to Toronto, I met with him. And he said he didn't have a job for me, but maybe at some point in the future there could be something. And so I ended up traveling that summer. Again, couldn't get a job, and I just needed a break. So traveled, came back in September, and then the market was really starting to pick up in Canada because we didn't really have the structural issues that the U.S. had. So I think it was more, the sentiment in the U.S. kind of flowed its way into Canada. But things were coming back. Condo launches were just starting again. And I got a call from two different groups and within a week of each other. And one of them was Lifetime, and they eventually offered me a job. So I started there as a, project manager. But really, I was just working beside Brian Brown, who was there, who was the VP of Development, I think his title was. And the job was just help him in any way I possibly could. And I was there to be a sponge. I was there to be kind of a support system, do the things that he didn't want to do or wasn't worth his time doing. And my whole goal out of it was I just want to learn as much as humanly possible. That's it. I probably would have done it for free.
You would have done it for free.
I definitely would have done it for free, actually. In fact, I think I told them at one point, like, I'll work for free. Just let me come in the office. And they were nice enough to actually pay me. But the goal was just learn as much as I could. So I spent 3 years there, and it was a perfect time because they were still a kind of small company transitioning from, a low-rise builder into a high-rise builder, and they owned some commercial properties, and they were sort of divesting of some of those and buying more high-rise development land. And so we had 6 launches in a span of 3 years. It was nonstop. The first year, I think I worked every single Saturday. I barely ever took vacations. All I cared about, I was obsessive about learning every piece of the business, and they were giving me the freedom to learn that. And so I actually, of the choices of companies I could have worked for, it was them or Mattamy. And Mattamy was enormous, and I thought, okay, maybe it's a great on the resume, but I don't know if I'm going to learn as much there. And I really love the high-rise space, so it was an obvious choice for me.
Or you learn a whole lot about one specific part of development, but not the whole picture.
Exactly. I would have been a small cog in a big wheel. And at Lifetime, I got to touch everything. I got to do property management. I got to do leasing. I got to do development planning. I didn't manage any construction or oversee any of that, but I got to look at it and kind of be close to it. The marketing and sales programs, all of that stuff. Color selections. I mean, everything I got to touch. And I didn't get a full life cycle of one project, but we had enough projects in the pipeline that I saw an entire life cycle across the 6 or 7 projects that they had on the go. 2012, I ended up joining Capital Developments. They were a small startup developer, so it was just 2 guys, Jordan and Todd. They had a partnership with Peter Freed. They had, I think, 3 sites, the 2 Redpath Towers and the art shop with him. And they were looking for somebody to come in and manage that portfolio. So they gave me an opportunity there. I joined them as a VP of development. I probably oversold myself a little bit because I only had 3 years experience, but I was so obsessive about learning every piece of the business that I felt reasonably confident that I could execute at the level of a typical VP of development. And so they gave me an opportunity, and I probably had a lot of growing to do. But the implementation of the work, the tasks, I knew how to do really well. And so I did that. I was with them for 8 years, and it grew from managing those projects to acquiring new sites. And so we acquired Bloor and Dufferin through a very competitive tender process against most of the biggest builders in the country. We won that, managed the development of that one, which was 1.8 million square feet. Did Azura condos. We did E2 condos in a partnership with Metropia. 11 Yorkville. There was a lot of different projects I got to touch and experience. Kind of grew me as a leader, gave me an opportunity to, build a bit of reputation myself, where I was sort of the guy in charge of things, and kind of hone my skills. And then eventually, there was a moment where I said, if I'm ever going to start my own company, now's the time. I didn't have kids. I didn't have real responsibilities in that way. And I took the leap. And I kind of figured if I failed, I'd always be able to get another job. So I left we talked about it in mid 2019. And then I stayed until the end of the year and even continued after that, kind of finishing off some of the projects we had, but officially kind of made the break January 1st, 2020 and started Republic. Had our first site lined up and then we grew that and we were off to the races.
Through a pandemic.
Well, that was pre-pandemic. So
January 2020. We were like, this is great. I can't. This is going to be the best 2 years of my life.
I was ready to go. The market was hot. Everything was feeling very good. There was the odd news story I remember reading in like November of 2019 of like, there's a flu going around in China, and nobody was paying attention to it, obviously. And then it took time to build up, and obviously March 2020 happened, and the world changed. So I was going into an office every day, and actually Adrian at Fitzrovia was nice enough to give me a desk and say, hey, if you need a place to just put your head down and do some work,
they were in the office full time. They didn't miss a beat, if I remember. We had Adrian on a couple of times, and I think he was just, let's just keep going. Don't worry about it.
He's laser focused, and he was very gracious to do that. I really appreciated that. And then, of course, COVID hit. They shut down the office. Everyone got sent home.
Well, imagine you had signed a lease in some office space you used for 2 months, and then...
well, it was just me at the time, so I didn't need office space. I could have worked from home if I wanted. I just thought it would be nice to get out of the office and keep a routine and keep myself out there. Then got used to working from home, and we all know how that started, and that dragged on for a very long time. And so I started hiring staff during COVID, which was interesting. And so it was like my first hire, I never even met him in person for like 7 months or 8 months before I finally met him. And we were just talking on Zoom or Teams every day, and became 2 of us, and then we added a third and a fourth, and we've kind of grown ever since. And now we're fully back in the office, and I think the world's getting back to reality. But
you're not in Fitzrovia's office anymore.
No, we have our own office now, building a new office for ourselves. So
nice.
Yeah.
And how many staff?
We're 8 right now. We've got 3 hires we're working on right now. So
and then talk about the developments you've been working on.
So the first project was a little one we started in Scarborough, 26 acres and about 5.5 million square feet.
Just little.
I mean, it started actually as the intention was not to be a huge project. We started with one site And that first site turned into a second and a third and a fourth. And the story started writing itself. Like I kind of had a vision of where it was going. And we became kind of the buyers of everything. And it was in an area where none of the big developers were playing in that area. And I knew I couldn't compete with them financially anyway. So I needed to focus on an area where there was opportunity. And I grew up in Scarborough. So I think a lot of people are kind of maybe scared of the optics or the reputation. And I grew up there and I knew that was nonsense. It was very good real estate. If you look at the whole GTA and you looked at the last 5 or 6 years of the market, everywhere was going up. There was growth happening in Vaughan and Markham and Richmond Hill and Etobicoke and Mississauga and everywhere but Scarborough. Meanwhile, it's a 416 area code. Where we were is 18 minutes to Union Station. So there's way more access to the city there than anywhere else. You're close to the lake, you're close to the bluffs, but it just had like a reputational issue. And I felt that is changeable. You can solve PR. You can solve the marketing challenge. You can't solve for bad real estate. And it was just great real estate. So started buying there and nobody was paying attention. So we were able to buy the land fairly well.
Does that translate into lower priced units than comparable ones downtown?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, our land cost was very competitive there. We had a very grand vision for the site. So as we went from one piece of the assembly to the 10th piece, and we finally got up to the full 26 acres, working on a partnership with Metrolinx, the story started to write itself, and the vision for something much more intensified started to reveal itself, and that's where the opportunity came. As you get that sort of density, and look, there was not without its challenges. There was contamination all over the site. Hell's Angels were a tenant at one point in time. There was a whole bunch of potential risks and issues that a lot of, I'd say, larger, more established developers probably wanted to avoid.
Or reliable holding income,
I mean, yeah, I suppose.
Yeah,
that's one way to look at it. Yeah. But the other way to look at it is, would institutional capital want to be a part of a project that had, that had certain types of tenants? So there was a lot of risks that had to be managed. But we felt we made calculated. It was all calculated risks. Like we knew that this was a solvable problem with the right amount of money, or this was going to take a bit of finesse, but that was a solvable problem. And if you bought the land competitively enough and you were able to present a ambitious enough vision that the city could get behind, you could create a lot of value and really reimagine a whole community. And that was the whole point of it for me. So still working on the city side of it.
Sure. But they're cooperative?
It depends who you talk to. I'd say of every project I've ever done in my life, it is the one where the most number of people are very, very supportive, like almost religiously supportive. They want the project badly. And, in our case, there's a couple people within the city planning department who are against the project.
Yeah, politics though.
But not even politics. The councillor is supportive of the project, and the local MP and MPPs are supportive of the project. It really is a city building project. We're trying to do really good things there. We're delivering a new GO station. We're delivering 5 acres of parks. We're delivering the daycares and the community centers. We're delivering housing that's needed. We're delivering a grocery store in one of the biggest food deserts in the city. We're delivering a whole retail program.
How many
units? We're trying
to
create a center for people. There's 7,500 units, give or take, right now. Probably it'll go up to about 8,000 units. So it's a large-scale project. It can have a meaningful dent in terms of the housing that we need to build in the city. But every day that goes on costs more money and makes the housing here more expensive. And so the longer you want to delay the inevitable, the more expensive it's going to be. And if the goal here is to create more affordability, more housing affordability, more supply, invest in neighborhoods that desperately need it, the quicker you move, the better. It's really simple. And so, unfortunately, the development process, and I've zoned a lot of sites over the years, and it's never easy, but oftentimes kind of cooler heads prevail and you find a path forward. And
are you gonna quote City of Edmonton?
No.
We had somebody from City of Edmonton on earlier in the podcast at the Edmonton Forum. She's from city planning, and the timeline she's talking about there are 70 days, 150 days. It's mind bending if you live in this environment.
Kim Retrance, Deputy City Manager of Urban Planning and the Economy at City of Edmonton. She said she got a major city development a permit or a approval done in 56 days. And she said the developer, she said, it takes a partnership. They showed up, they had everything ready, they were ready to go, and we worked with them, and we were able to get it done in less than 2 months.
The thing the city sometimes doesn't fully recognize, and actually there's individuals within the city that absolutely understand this, and I've had many offline conversations about it. If you were to expedite the process and kind of cut through the politics and cut through the, the precedent setting or any of that sort of stuff, and just focused on trying to build good quality projects and focus on less of what could make it bad and more of what is great about it, you could move things forward a lot quicker, and developers would probably pay massive premiums in order to do that. I would absolutely pay a premium to have a dedicated planner working on my file, only my file, and their sole job is to help me get to an approval. I would absolutely pay a premium if you could get me an approval in 60 days or 90 days versus going on 3 years now. I mean, think of what it costs to think of just the carrying cost, but also the construction escalations. I mean, that's the biggest thing on a $4 or $5 billion project. Imagine how much construction costs escalated over a 3-year period, because the whole project gets delayed for 3 years or 2 years or whatever.
Yeah, it's
enormous.
Not even considering the 400 basis point increase in prime over that time period, which it just is what it is. Let's back up. We're kind of going backwards through this conversation, but as you were talking this through, if you've kind of walked backwards into this sort of community planning, you've got metro links, relationships, and all these types of things. You had to have raised capital when you were going out on your own. Clearly, you had some capital partners. I'm assuming you weren't just putting some savings away. You decided to start a development company with your own savings.
Yeah.
And so you found this one piece of land, and now it's blossomed into this great opportunity. You must be going back to your capital partner saying, okay, guess what? It's gone even bigger now. What's those types of conversations like? And maybe without divulging, how was it been on the capital raising, and what's that part of the entrepreneurship been like for you?
So the first site that we tied up there, and we ended up getting 5 of the blocks. I mean, if you look at the site, there was a 20-acre piece. There was I think it was 4.5-acre piece. And then there was like a handful of small little pieces. The first site we tied up was the 4.5-acre piece. And then we started getting some of the little pieces that were all directly adjacent to the 20-acre piece. Eventually, the 20-acre piece came. We had to close on the first pieces before the.
And so was that the vision always, was to get the whole thing, or do we?
It wasn't always the vision, but we knew in the back of our mind it was a path forward. We at the time, I just had the first piece, and I was like, okay, we can do something with this. This is a great project on its own. I knew that it was very, very ambitious to assume that we could get the full 26 acres, but I thought that we would be the obvious buyer if that 20-acre piece wanted to sell, and so just the fact that we were there gave us a leg up. So when we closed on the first pieces, we had one partner, Harlow Capital, who came in, and I knew Harlow's CFO from my CD days because he was the CFO of Freed at the time, and we had a partnership, and he had seen me work, and we had gotten along really well, had a lot of respect for one another, and sort of he brought me to the table and said, look, Matt's a great partner and he can execute really well, and I'm not from a real estate family, I'm not second or third generation, I don't have the capital other people do, but I can execute and work really hard, and I think I can outperform. That was my sales pitch to them, but I'm going to need the capital. So they stepped up, they raised the money, they put the money up and raised some of it. That was the first tranche of capital.
The GPLP with you as the GP?
We were actually co-GPs. Okay. So we said we'll be co-GPs, and then we knew that if we got the full 20-acre piece and got the full 26 acres of the assembly, we would need to go raise more money. So the idea was we'll be the GPs, and then we'll go out and raise more institutional or family office capital for the rest of the money. Of course, as that was happening, COVID hit, and everybody who we were talking to about raising money didn't want to touch anything with a 10-foot pole. But I got to give credit to my lenders on it. They saw the vision that we had. We presented to them what I think was a pretty succinct and clear vision for where this was going. And they ended up stepping up and financing it through debt. So we actually didn't have to raise very much money on the project. You'd be shocked at how much money we had to raise to make it happen. But debt is expensive and time has gone on. And so, we were able to get the project to sort of a place where we all felt confident in, relatively confident anyway, in the density plan and the vision for the site. and we've been able to advance a lot of things. We've been able to delineate some of the environmental risks on the site quite a bit more than we had originally, and so far everybody's been very happy. It's been a great success.
What's the biggest learning experience you've had from this process?
Every project I've done, I've learned a lot, but on this one in particular, I'd say a key lesson I learned is that just because someone says, they want to work with you doesn't always mean they do. And sometimes, and I think I was maybe too polite and too nice about things early on, because I really, I grew up in Scarborough and I really cared a lot about where this went. I wanted the whole community to be on board with it. I wanted the city to be on board with it. We had, half a dozen community consultation meetings, pre-app consultation meetings with the city before we ever submitted. We were trying to really build consensus before we ever went in. And then, of course, I think sometimes it's luck of the draw, but you get some people who just search for reasons to say no instead of reasons to support a project. And, I probably, frankly, I hate to say it, but I should have appealed sooner, and I should have pushed the agenda much sooner. We tried to really work with them, and it, that has not.
Yeah, there's
ideal,
a reputational component to it. We've had other developers on where they talk about it. We're proud that we've never taken anything to the tribunal. We're proud that we've never had to appeal. We've always found a way to work with the councillors and the community to get it through. And I guess to each its own, right? And there's other developers, I think, where they just can't get the tribunal fast enough, right? Like it's the ultimate.
Before I started this company at Capital, we barely ever went to the board. Almost every, and I was working in some pretty difficult wards, like Yonge and Eglinton, as an example. We were able to get most of our sites there approved without going to the board, just working with the community, working with planning staff, and also working with the councillor's office and getting it done. I think when Doug Ford got elected, and he was really elected on a mandate to really push the housing agenda. Like, I think we were seeing kind of just issues were piling up, and he felt like we needed to do something, and he started implementing new policies. And I think in some ways people at the city took offense to it, and they started to counter those policies. So the province is now saying we want to go one direction, and the city almost in a reactionary way, they said we're not going to go that direction. We're going to find every possible way to stifle you moving in that direction.
It's the polarization of decision making. It just happens as a result of humankind.
And so the provinces continued to layer on policy after policy and pushing this agenda further and further forward, and it just felt like it was almost upsetting the city, and they went the opposite direction. So in my kind of pre-Republic days, I always felt I could get to a yes from the city. But as soon as that kind of tension started happening, I have just noticed. We submitted 6 applications last year for a portfolio we're doing for a family office partner of ours, and another application for a site that we owned. We did them all simultaneously, and so I've gotten an absolute clear visual on how the process can work, because they're all going at the same time. And I'm shocked to say that almost all of them, except for one, has ended up at the board, and even the one that hasn't gone to the board probably should have gone to the board.
And I hate to say that. At the board?
We're going to be successsul. We're not out of the woods on any of them, but we've got settlements on a few of them ready to go.
And that partly is just because you're not asking for anything that's unreasonable. Is that kind of the position?
Look, I think. Look, we are an ambitious group. We do so, but I think generally we look at things based on prevailing policy, and we want to try and understand the conditions on the ground to try and deliver something that makes sense. It just has to make sense. If you can articulate to someone why this is a positive thing, why this is going to improve the community. And by the way, I don't like doing projects that theoretically I can get approved at the board, but would be an ugly fight. Like, I don't ever want to do a project where I'm taking something away that's really, really important and valuable to the community and not replacing it with something 10 times better. Like, I don't want to take on those fights. But we do take on a lot of projects that I'd say a lot of other developers would probably look at and say, I wouldn't take that risk. That's a challenge. So I've described us as I like to call us like the Navy SEALs of development, because we want to do the most complicated projects that require the most vision, the most ambition, to make them happen. But if you do all those things well and you can present a clear enough vision and you can get some success, they can be home runs. That's the type of projects we like to do.
Are you hunting for projects now, new sites?
We're always looking.
And where do you think pricing is too? I'll tack that on as well.
We have 11,000 units in our pipeline right now. So we don't have a need to buy anything, but we are always looking because you never know when a great opportunity comes up, and we do want to continue to grow.
Your pencil's down until the opportunity arises, and then it pencils back up again. Right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not out there hungry looking at deals, but when deals get brought to us and it makes sense and we're a good fit for them, we'll do them. And part of it too today is structure. I think you can't just go buy sites unzoned, take on all the risk, pay to finance them today at the market rates that they were 8 months ago. Like, you just can't do that. You have to really structure deals and get creative, and we've shown we've been able to do that with a lot of partners, and so we're continuing to look at deals like that.
So Adam and I are lenders, and we try not to make this about lending very much, but this is interesting. We obviously every morning get up and look where the rates are, and we're watching the rates during the day, and that's just the reality of being a lender. You're facing it on two sides, whether you're financing the land, assuming you've got some debt on your land, and then of course you're looking at the purchasing power of your condo buyers who are also obviously using financing. How often are you monitoring where rates are? Or do you have to just take a bigger picture perspective?
I mean, we look at it. Rates obviously are really important in the real estate space, but in the case of the condo world, like, we have a lot of immigration coming here. We have a restriction on supply, so we're still very bullish long term on people wanting to buy housing and people wanting to buy the most affordable form of housing, which is a condo. What we pay more attention to is pricing it relative to where the rest of the market is in a way that would make it competitive, delivering a better quality product for more value for a better price, and making sure that when people have options in the market, our option is seen as the most desirable option. Because I think there's always going to be changes in rates and things like that, but it's impossible for the taps to completely stop in the current environment we're in, where you just have a shortage of supply and a huge amount of demand coming in. I've said this many times, we have 50,000 people moving out of Toronto every year. So if you're building in Toronto, you're basically appealing to, you're just getting wealthier and wealthier people staying, and, people who are in the, the bottom quotients of people are having to move out to other places. And as a result of that, there's generally always going to be some demand. It feels anyway, like today, there's always going to be some demand for, reasonably priced product in the city, regardless of where interest rates are. And you're seeing that now, even in housing. Housing prices are ticking up again, even though interest rates are
more or less flat.
Yeah, but flat over the last few months. But over the last year and a half, they've hockey stick. So
Toronto defies description in that way, though. It's
very unique.
Yeah.
Real estate is very local focused. So what I say here does not apply to Calgary, does not apply to Vancouver, does not apply to Boston or any other city in the world. I think you have to look at everything on a very local, micro perspective.
You're fresh off a panel today, innovations in mixed-use communities. What was your big takeaway from the panel today?
We talked about a bunch of different, there's a bunch of different topics. What I tried to convey as much as I could, and I've now done this on a few different projects. I got to do a really great mixed-use project when I was at CD called Bloor and Dufferin, 7.5 acres at the corner of Bloor and Dufferin on a subway station. And then I took a lot of learnings from that and brought them over to Scarborough Junction. And there's a number of things that are changing. We talked about anchors and, what draws people in. The anchor used to be the Bay or Eaton's or Nordstrom or whatever. Now anchors are things like, obviously grocery stores can be anchors, but public spaces, public squares, parks, attractions that draw people in that make you want to go there. And Scarborough doesn't really have a lot of that. Like, as someone who grew up there, like the one place you could go is Scarborough Town Center, like an indoor mall. That was that was the hub of Scarborough. And that will continue to be a hub, but as Scarborough grows and needs to grow more, you need to create more of those hubs around, that region. And so we're trying to create a hub for South Scarborough, and that includes, great parks. That includes a public square that's got patios that spill out onto it, and provisions so you could have festivals and concerts and events and things of that nature there. That's one key thing. Pedestrian walkability and mobility around sites, especially the bigger they get, is really, really, really important. Kind of segmenting nodes. So, you go here for, you want to be outdoors and have the playgrounds. You go here for the community center. You've got your Go Station over here. You've got your grocer over here. You've got public plazas, here. And so you want to kind of spread out the spaces that draw people in. So basically anybody from any age wants to be there. Whether you're a kid and you want to play in the splash pad, or you're an older person, you want to sit on a patio and have a glass of wine, you've got something for everybody. And hopefully you can draw people in that way from outside of just where you're building. And then obviously you've got your residential above to support it. That was kind of a big theme. And then, how do you make it interesting? Like, you want to make it walkable. One of my architects calls it organized chaos. You want every 20 feet the storefronts to change, the signage to change, the lighting to change, the setbacks of the building to change. You want it to be, if you think about the most interesting streets in the world that you actually want to walk down, they're not all the same. They feel different every few steps.
Because over 100 years, someone's made 1,000 different decisions to change the energy as you walk.
It adds texture to the street.
Yeah,
it adds a lot of texture. It's very hard to do that when it's one developer building one large community, because typically you just, the architects will design it and, they bring glass to the ground or whatever it might be. And we really try to avoid that and really pay a lot of attention to like those micro details that will make somebody's experience better. So like really honing some of that kind of psychology, sociology sort of chops from university.
There it is.
We
came back
full
to it.
circle.
Yeah. So we talked a lot about that. We looked a little bit at conversions of, I know you had somebody on just earlier about converting office buildings. Also looking at things like parking, like how when you're building these communities and they're going to be there for, you're building them over 10 or 15 or 20 years and they're going to stand for 100 years. You want to make sure that they're flexible and designed in a way that as the world changes and it's changing faster and faster, you're able to respond to that. So as an example, we're building above grade parking at Scarborough Junction. Now we are wrapping it, and so there was some debate about should you wrap above grade parking or not, because if you wrap it, it's harder to retool that into something else. But there's also things you can do if you do wrap it and make it, nicer today, where you could still retool it into something else if you didn't need the parking.
Like retail use.
Yeah, lots of things. Could be logistics. Could be all sorts of different things you can do. So
anything's more interesting than parking, basically.
Yeah,
yeah. And the world is changing so fast with technology now that I think the way we build today is going to constantly evolve. Every 2, 3, 4, 5 years, there's going to be meaningful changes, and it's going to force us to have to really think much farther ahead.
You didn't build in robot charging stations to your building, things like that? It's
no, but obviously electric charging stations is going to be critically important. Most people are going to be driving electric cars in the future, so that's important.
Tesla's number one selling car right now. They're driving them now. It's
they are. Yeah.
Matt, we are out of time today, but I want to thank you so much for coming on, sharing your knowledge. Aaron and I have always been fascinated by anybody that leaves a giant institution, which is funny because we both work and really enjoy working at a giant institution, but we are just fascinated by guys that go out and do their own thing. So we love having those kinds of guests on. It's a very interesting story, interesting launch time, and the success in a short period of time is very, very impressive. So, we'd love to have you come back on in a couple of years and see
the success.
Yeah, that'd be great. But
love that. That'd be great.
I want to thank First National for powering the podcast. And of course, Real Estate Forums for hosting us here today at the Land and Development Conference. Once again, Matt, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks,
Appreciate
Matt.
it.